Hey, everyone, thank you so much for joining the Behind Company Alliance podcast. Today we have Alex Nikityuk, founder and CEO of Maru, payments platform for the wedding and events industry. Alex, thank you so much for being on the show. I'm really excited to dive deep into your background, your experience, and get to know what you've got going on at Maru. But before we jump into that, what were you doing before you started the company?
Hey, Julian. Pleasure to be here. And thanks a lot for inviting me on your podcast. Before starting Maru, I worked for a year and a half at Revolut here in London, where I'm currently based. My responsibilities included building their corporate finance function, financial modeling, and I was also part of the core team raising Series D back in 2020. Before Revolut, I spent 7 years working in General Electric company, also in corporate finance. I initially started in Moscow, Russia, but then it moved to pretty much globally. So all over our family moved, to China, to France, to UK, a bunch of states in the US, back to Paris, then back to London. And my first workplace was Procter & Gamble. So I did a couple of years there after graduation from the university.
That's incredible. How was the experience like moving to different countries and also were you doing the same job function at each kind of career stop, or was it with the same company? Tell me a little bit more about that.
It was more like, it was something like an internal audit function. Yeah. So my job at GE, it included various projects. So the range was between implementation of, ERP systems on a massive, scale businesses to just pure financial audits to supply chain, improvement projects. And then, and it was a pretty interesting experience because we were moving all over the place, as I mentioned, together with my family. And we had a chance to see like how such a global business like General Electric is built and how it works on the scale of the whole planet pretty much.
Yeah. When looking at business, obviously now you're within the startup space but we're working within the corporate level, and how different is each environment? And I guess what are the components that a company that's global has to kind of get involved in or think about when building business and connecting with relationships and working internationally and globally that, say a startup doesn't necessarily have to focus on?
Well, so it's being a part of the bigger company gives a perspective how things should work on the scale. So it actually was very nice transition for me coming from like a massive organization first to Revolut, because, it was kind of taking more risk, but then like scaling a bit or going a bit lower into like more focused type of work. And then like when I started my own company, it was like highest risk, but like super narrow. So I think it just gives you an opportunity to understand kind of how the end state should look. Yeah. And then kind of connecting the dots when you start something yourself, like this is where I need to go. And like, you kind of already know the reverse engineered like path to get there.
Yeah. How should you said, it gave you an insight on how companies should scale or should work at that scale. How should they work? How should they be organized and strategized at that level?
Yeah. So I think it's mainly about like what departments should be there, how they should be, communicating between each other. It's also interesting to see the difference between, in every company, there is its own culture, and there is also like one or two departments that are the strength of the company. Just to give you a perspective, our example, actually, Procter & Gamble, it's usually HR and marketing. Yeah. In GE, it's engineering and finance. In Revolut, it's actually product and engineering. So, and those departments, they have power, they have negotiation power at the table, and like they drive their initiatives and have the strength. So it's also good, like when I started Maru, just looking like which departments should be, stronger, and, what should have, what part of the company should have a louder voice, I would say. We're building, payments or fintech products. So engineering function and like perspective is really strong. At the same time, our market is very emotional. So wedding and events, like you can't remove emotion from there, which is why marketing and everything related to, brand and design of the product is essential. Otherwise we'll be just another like horizontal solution that, that's already present on the market.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. And going to your experience at Revolut, and I was reading a little bit about your background, and you were part of kind of the core team that raised the Series D, which is, a huge success. It's a massive round, 500 million. What goes into the strategy and the planning around that that's different from previous rounds that you had raised amongst that company?
Well, to be very transparent, this was the only fundraise I've had. So I can't, judge. At the same time, I can compare, what was Series D at Revolut versus, pre-seed and seed round financing with my own company. So obviously, when on the later stages, you have much more data to back up your story. You can actually paint it only through the data, through the charts, and especially like if it's, going top right corner, it's so much easier to articulate, your strength and, your traction, and like my responsibilities included, like taking those historical data and projecting it into the future, basically taking into account various initiatives that the company was taking at that time or planned, for example, expansion, regional expansion, product expansion. Yeah. So like, introduction of different, like new segments on the market, and you factor it on into the model and, produce the end result where we think we're going to be, at the next fundraise. So like in the next milestone. And this is what it's going to be in terms of, much more early stage fundraise, which, the experience I had. So for example, our pre-seed fundraise, I spent like around 160 meetings with investors. And I think in the first 100, I just got straight no, just like because. So it was a very kind of humbling experience because you kind of like, I started and approached it in the beginning, like with this Revolut bravado, just like, hey, I did this, so I can do that too. And reality is like so much different. Like you have like in that case, in my case, I had the idea on a napkin and nobody kind of believed in it. So it took a while, but it was interesting kind of also experience and learning journey, just like to grow your skin, make it like much, much thicker, being okay with like hearing no 400 times and just like keep pushing regardless of what's happening around. So it's been 2 years, like pretty much exactly 2 years since, we started the company, and, we're in a much better place right now. We didn't announce it publicly, so that's kind of exclusive for your podcast. But yesterday night actually, we hit our 1 mil ARR, milestone, which we're going to spend 10 months, going to it. So we're kind of very excited, and internally, and can't wait to share it with the broader, public.
That's awesome. And congrats on the success. And it sounds like there's been so much work that's done, and definitely want to dive into the work and what's involved in the success of Meru. But one last question in regards to your experience raising money that was different from obviously the Series D is what changed? Did anything in your strategy change after hearing the 100, no's that you received from the different investors? I think a lot of people think about, one direction and just kind of using that strategy, that initial strategy that they built and the initial pitch, everything that is encompassing their product pitch to get the investors and moving forward with that. But is there anything that you would kind of recommend to founders as they move through this process on, either changing or adjusting to see success?
So in terms of changing, definitely improve your pitch. So like with every presentation, with every call with investors, I always noticed what worked, what didn't, where people got hooked up on like something was not clear for them. So like I improved the way how I was saying this. Or for example, when I made a statement and the person, or actually 5 people, like asked me multiple times, like, what exactly do I mean? In the next calls, I just started saying it differently, like providing more explanation, like making very clear upfront. So you just kind of do it again. Like in my case, it was 260 calls. And like in the end, it just like, a song, very fluent, very like clear, you just keep pitching and people just see this drive, confidence and passion about what you're doing. And, they just feel it.
Yeah.
And well, they follow. In terms of what not to do, I would say, don't change your pitch based on investors' feedback. Basically, don't change your idea of what you're doing, like based on this. Like I had so many, like I had this collection of emails when I sent to people, and when they were telling me like, if I would be a friend, I would just like, I would recommend you to drop this idea and do something different. Like this will lead you to nowhere. And, or just people like telling me like, this is small market, or like, it's not going to go anywhere. This kind of stuff. So don't treat this. It's just like not your people, and move on and keep pushing with the vision and idea you've had, because otherwise, your product will be just, patched blankets, like stacks with of ideas of different people, which in the end, like nobody will need it, or it will be needed by like this small group of people, that small group of people, but not a cohesive, scalable platform that you can, grow over the next, I don't know, like 5-10 years.
Incredible. Yeah, that's great advice. Diving into Meru, what inspired the idea?
Yeah, it's actually a funny story. So I left Revolut at the time. I had first time in my life, I had 1 month gap between, jobs. So literally nothing to do. So I was just chilling. And a friend of ours, she got married in New York at the time. So August 2020. And she called my wife, shared all the issues she'd been through, like during the wedding planning process, her wedding planning process. And also how difficult was it to pay for the wedding? And you can imagine it's like midst of COVID. It just started. So it's kind of like a mess. And I was like sitting and thinking like, I've been following Klarna for quite a while, just from the professional standpoint. And I was like, why can you buy a Peloton bike for like $3,500, finance it over like 2 years, but you can't do the same for $3,500, wedding photography invoice? So what I did, I quickly built a landing page, I think at that time I called the company Wet Plan or like Wet Fit. And I also, did some market research, learned that 90% of ladies in the US within 1 or 2 days after being engaged, they make an Instagram or Facebook post. And in 76% cases, they use 3 hashtags: engaged, proposal, I said yes. And basically what I did, I went through Instagram and Facebook, messaged everybody whom I found like those posts at that time, saying, congrats guys, beautiful ring, you're a beautiful couple. By the way, I started this company that offers 0% APR financing. If you want, check it out here. And I think I sent around 300 messages until basically Instagram blocked. And then I got 92 responses within a couple of days. And that kind of made me think like, all right, there is an interest of people, they really, it's something potentially can be needed. And yeah, just started digging. Within like 2-3 months, I engaged a friend of mine from Revolut just to build a very like rough prototype. And we processed first few transactions, mainly from the money I borrowed from my dad. So it was kind of a fun journey in the beginning. But yeah, I mean, after that, in parallel, I was doing all those investor calls. And within 6 months, like by the end of 6 months, we closed our first round of 800K. A lot of angel investors, couple of funds, and one including basically Y Combinator. So we were accepted to Summer 21 bet, which was pretty exciting. And, it's also very important to note, in the beginning of 2001, I met my co-founder. Her name is Anya Winika. So she spent 15 years in the weddings industry in the US, worked at a company called The Knot. It's basically a global leader in the wedding space. And she worked there since 2005, kind of building and growing the platform with the original founders. So kind of like celebrity in the market, like everybody knows Anya and she knows a lot of people. So it was kind of blessing, for us to meet because, I bring this finance kind of expertise. She brings weddings expertise. And it really like made a very good match, and I'm going just to push that particular product forward. Yeah. And as I mentioned, like we started as a buy now, pay later, or like Klarna or a firm full weddings idea. That's the idea we went through, which, through IC, but we quickly realized that the NPL or buy now, pay later is just a one payment method. And we kind of shoot ourselves in the foot by offering only one option. And we decided, let's do zoom out and start just offering digital checkout experience for the industry, because the typical, transactional flow in the wedding space is checks and envelopes with cash, some like maybe ACH transactions, like fragmented card and so on. So we took decision, let's make a BNPL as one of our payment methods. But in addition to that, let's add a bunch of new kind of contemporary payment methods that will help to drastically improve payment experience, both for the couples, but most importantly for the businesses. Because I want to make sure it's also like very clear, with couples, you have pretty much we hope 100% churn, like they don't come back. Yeah. So you have them over like 12 to 15 months at maximum because they got married and they're out. So for us, the main focus is actually the business. So the wedding planners, venues, transportation, photographers, videographers, entertainment, like flowers, any other provider in the market. It's a pretty large market. So 600,000 businesses only in the US, and the total US weddings market is $100 billion industry. So there are 2.1 million weddings every year, regardless like prices, non-prices, which makes pretty, agnostic to external events. And with the average cost of wedding between like $40,000 to $50,000, that's what makes this 100 billion, number. Yeah. So basically right now, just kind of, to conclude, we started with a BNPL. Right now, we kind of transitioned to be more like a finance platform, like payments platform for wedding, professionals, wedding events professionals. That at the moment we're just working on improving the payments experience. And there is a lot of items that we do. So we do invoicing, we do payments, payroll, international payments, lending. So not lending, sorry, factoring. So what we call book now, pay later. And we have some other cool products in the pipeline that we're going to launch in 2023.
That's incredible. And I love how you've transitioned the product through just the experience of the consumer and realizing that. And I love the idea of kind of taking a step back and seeing the broader view that not only is it, paying now and or booking now and paying later, but it's the idea of offering a seamless kind of payment process for an industry that has been probably the same for, I don't know how many years, probably for 10 plus, 20 plus, 70 years, right? So, and it's kind of modernizing that process. I feel like some of the best and a lot of the most successful startups I've talked to kind of find themselves in that kind of service and technology piece where it's not necessarily disrupting something, kind of an incumbent, but it is kind of offering a easy and more efficient way to complete processes in a certain kind of ecosystem or a service like weddings and wedding planning. So it's incredible to see the success. And I'd love to hear more, like, tell me more about the traction. Who are you working with? What kind of partners? Obviously, congrats on the recent 1 mil ARR. It's incredible. What's gotten you there and what are you kind of focused on in the near future?
Yeah. A lot of grind that took us there. So we, as I mentioned, like we started with the BNPL and like we gradually introduced new products, which started, monetizing over a period of time. Well, in terms of kind of the current offering, we've been asked a lot. So like, why it's a problem, like what problem you're solving, because, businesses accept payments right now without a problem, like Stripe, Square, SumUp, whatever, like Venmo, PayPal, there are major players in this space. But the coolest part about us is like we're solving problems such as there is a couple they get an invoice from a photographer. At the same time, this couple has a wedding planner in between who actually manages those invoices. But the payment is done by the father of the bride. And like all this complexity around the payment, like process, visibility on this invoice, control of the status, like when it was seen, when it's past due, reminders, and so on. That's what we handle both for the couple and for planners and for dads, wherever is needed, and for the end service provider. In terms of, what's coming next, we are currently just optimizing the payment experience for both sides. Because to be honest, like first year was just like, let's go quickly, fast, go to market. I would say like we cared not much we didn't care a lot about the cost side of things. So now the priority is like, let's just optimize the margins, because we can clearly see, we increased our platform monthly TPV by 161x within 10 months. So, there is a massive volume that's coming through the platform right now. So we have a lot of data to, look at, improve. The key focus at the moment is just optimizing underlying costs.
Yeah. No, that's incredible. And how do you, in terms of this experience, based on the past experiences, what's exciting or I guess different about, you were working in a corporate environment, you were handling a lot of different, not only financial, but logistics and auditing and kind of and learning a lot about kind of on a grander scale, how companies work. But what's got you really excited about this opportunity and building your own company that, that is different from your past experience?
Yeah. You can ask my friends, they will tell you, like, I always, regardless where I worked, whether it was G or Revolut, I had a list of ideas. I always like writing them down, thinking like one day I'm going to get to them. But obviously, like, due to a lot of, work that I've had at each and every like project that I worked on, never had time. And it just happened to be like one that kind of like really made sense, because I feel that I'm a relatively creative person, just like, I like art. I like, sometimes to draw. I'm very into like product design just because, I like this stuff. At the same time, you can ask folks like, I love financial models, like building connectivity, because it's also kind of, creative project, but it makes sense like financially. So you understand like the dependencies, like solvency checks and dependencies and stuff like that. So I really like in this role and in this business that I kind of combine both. Like, one of the coolest or interesting aspects of Maru, especially from like design perspective, it should bring two things. One, it should give you trust as a user that, hey, you are actually like making payment for $50,000 for for a financial transaction. Like you're giving up 50K. And the platform on which you're doing this should translate this trust and like confidence, like everything's going to work properly and so on. At the same time, people need to remember and like be reminded they're actually paying for their wedding. So there should be something emotional that should kind of create the response in them. And like connecting those two, it's one hell of a task for us in the beginning and like for our designers right now. So I'm really, excited about this challenge because for me, it kind of breached two parts of my personality, like emotional, creative, and like analytical and financial.
How do you create that experience, but also, do kind of, I don't know if it's the dirty work, but of the, the transactions that are just necessary, just like transactions. How do you connect those two? Because that's difficult. It sounds something they don't, I guess, naturally go and coincide together, and that they would need some kind of effort behind that. But how do you do that?
Yeah. Luckily, again, I have a great co-founder. So Anya, again, she has this feel of the industry of people who are going through the wedding planning process. She knows like, everything about the typical couple that's going through level bride, that's going through the payment experience, how stressful it is, how, we at some point when we just started, we actually draw the emotional kind of roller coaster, like how people feel depending on like the engagement period until the wedding date and like what emotional stress they experience over this period of time. And like when we can approach those people, those couples and like when it's best to give certain communication, so on. So to answer your question, my co-founder, she brings really, that's, industry specific knowledge on the visuals, on the brand, on the design. And I guess I'm more like clearly like finance guy in this case, or who ensures that, transactions actually goes from like point A, point B with all the participants being involved in the right way.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that cohesive relationship. I have that with my co-founder as well. And just talking to other founders, it's so valuable to have that relationship and kind of complement each other in the skills that you have. Tell me about what are some of the biggest risks that Maru faces today?
Biggest risks, I feel we started growing faster than we anticipated. We're basically like, hitting the ceiling of like our internal capacity, both from the, engineering perspective. So that's why we, for instance, rebuild the whole back end and front end of the platform, because like all the monolith type of code that we built in the beginning very quickly, it wasn't sustainable anymore. So just like making sure that we would cohesively transition, that's the biggest risk I see. I would say just in general, kind of the trust factor, because like we're a new company coming into like a market that's pretty well established. Again, the benefit for us, there's not many players in our field, like vertically specific.
Yeah.
We have a couple of competitors, but other than that, there's just horizontal players such, take like Klarna, Firm, Stripe and Square, or PayPal. But yeah, so I guess the biggest risk for any startup is execution.
Yeah.
So how well you can prioritize, how well you can execute, which is again, I like this. Well, I feel good about this risk because it's internal and it's pretty much like all in our control. So as long as we get the team on board with the vision that we have and the goals we set for the company for this and next year, I don't think like there should be anything stopping us. Obviously, market environment is difficult, but I'm glad that we pivoted away from being solely focused on the buy now, pay later to a more like a broader and cohesive, platform that solves a much bigger problem than just like, financing. There is just so much more value that we bring into the process that gives us this, significant lever not to be dependent on like, or being worried too much about rising, interest rates, general kind of collapse looks like of the global economy, like, every region, something's happening here and there. Yeah. So I would say that those are kind of the few.
Yeah. Well, if everything goes well, what's the long-term vision for Maru?
I would say my ideal state of things will be like, like when we think about travel, the first thing we go is Airbnb. So like, oh, I'm going like to travel, like I'm going to check Airbnb rate. So I wanted that in the future for people, when they get engaged, the first thing they do is they create Maru account and they start organizing their financials, in place on the platform. They start planning their payments to their vendors, like adding them into their favorites and stuff like that, and like planning their budget. Because, our key focus is and will always be a financial part of the wedding planning focus. We're not interested to go into the emotional component of like choosing the colors and the theme and like this type of stuff. Because first of all, there are just so many other platforms. Secondly, I don't think like we can bring much value. I feel like our core expertise is like fintech payments, just like making one of the biggest problems in the wedding space, like payments, making it smoother. And yeah, I guess I want to make sure that in the future, actually not even when they engage, but like when the guy is thinking about like, or whatever, one partner is thinking about proposing to their partner, they create an account with us.
Yeah.
If they need extra like money for the ring, they can approach us up front, or then like once they, got engaged, they start creating and building their profile, adding their parents as the, I don't know, contributors to the wedding budget, adding guests if they want for cash registry and stuff like that.
Incredible. No, I love that. I always like to ask this question, not only for selfish research purposes, but also for my audience. What books or people have influenced you the most?
A lot, but the most recent, I really like this Build by Tony Fadell. There's a lot of like, American literature, business literature that's like have one or two ideas in the book. They just keep pushing it like over 400 pages. And you're like, guys, I already got it. Like, I don't need another anecdote to support this idea. So in his book, in Builds, I really like that there's just like every article or every chapter, it has its own standalone idea. And it's really relevant for different like moments in your life or, entrepreneurial journey or interaction with the team and so on. So like, you don't need to read it like from the beginning to the end. You could just jump in the middle and you're going to get the value and you can go back. So I keep coming back and forth, like with the book. I read it once, but I'm reading some articles again and again because it's just so helpful. Just kind of reminding yourself, one of the recent aspects, we brought up with my team was like, he's talking about the fact that the company should be focusing on one customer. Like in our cases, you can imagine have couples with have difference. And, you always you need to take the side, unfortunately.
Mm-hmm.
And like, it's a very important because, he's saying like the moment the company is trying to like sit on both chairs, that's when it starts going to an end. And yeah, those kind of reminders is really helpful.
Incredible. Well, thank you so much, Alex, for being on the show. I know we're at time here, and I super appreciate not only just your experience and the knowledge you brought to the table in regards to scaling and seeing how the larger organization and structure of a company kind of boils down to what you're doing now at Maru. And it doesn't surprise me that you're having so much success. And I hope to hear that Maru is the Airbnb of wedding and wedding planning. Last little bit, I always like to ask my guests, where can we support? Give us your LinkedIns, your Twitters. How can we get involved? How can we support Maru and your...
I don't know, yes. If you can like our posts on LinkedIn, our news, that will be incredible. If you have any friends in the US who's getting married, let them know about Maru because we can help big time.
Amazing. Well, Alex, thank you so much for joining the show. I appreciate it. And I can't wait to share this with my audience. And I hope you enjoyed yourself, but thank you again.
Thanks, Jordan. Really glad to be here.
Thanks.
Welcome to this episode of the Payments Show podcast. I'm your host, Satwant Full, and today I'll be speaking to Alexey Nikityuk, who is the founder and CEO of Maru. Maru is a new payment solution which helps engaged couples pay for their weddings more easily. If you're new to the show, this podcast aims to help you increase sales and profits in your company through the latest payment technologies and platforms. Make sure you subscribe to the show so that you don't miss any future episodes. Enjoy the show. Alexey, welcome to the Payment Show.
Hi, Seth. Thanks for having me.
I think this is going to be a very interesting podcast because just when I thought I'd pretty much seen everything in payments, I came across your company while I was just doing some research to see what's new in the world of payments, and I was completely blindsided by a wedding payments company. So this is going to be a really interesting discussion, I think. So I hope you're ready for it.
I'm excited. Happy to share a lot of news about Maru.
Brilliant. Where are you working from at the moment?
So the whole company is remote. I'm currently based in London. Previously, I worked at Revolut, so this is where I kind of stayed and launched the company. It was launched literally from this bedroom. For the last year, I've been working from here. But my team, we're based between Kansas City in Missouri, London, Dresden in Germany, Russia. Now we added another person on the team from Chicago, so growing.
Good stuff. And where's your actual headquarters?
Well, it's kind of hard question like for the 100% virtual remote company. We consider this to be Kansas City because, well, this is our US presence.
Okay, so you are the CEO and co-founder of Maru. The other co-founders, so Anya and Andre, basically you all started the company, and the one-line summary of it is you're revolutionizing payments for the wedding industry through a platform that is designed and built exclusively for it. So is that a pretty accurate one-liner for the company?
Yeah, it's an absolutely accurate one-liner.
Okay, good stuff. Well, I thought it would be quite good to start off with the situation in the weddings world. So while I was doing research for this episode, I found some pretty interesting stats. Apologies for international listeners, but all these figures will be in US dollars. So the average wedding costs between $28,000 and $35,000 US dollars. So the $28,000 is from you guys, and the $35,000 was an article I found from a website called The Knot, and they did a survey in 2016 and some pretty interesting stats as to what the biggest expenses are in a wedding. So I'm just going to go through a few examples. The venue alone is normally about $16K. The photographer and the videographer around $2,000 to $3,000 each. The band for reception's about $4,000. So there's some pretty hefty costs there. And I guess one of the main reasons that you started the company is to help with this. So what was the driver on starting the company and how all of you founders got together?
Sure. Basically, I left Revolut in July 2020. I was thinking like, okay, what am I going to do next? And it was the first time in, I would say, like 10 years of my professional career when I had this like period between, not having any job on hand at the moment. So I was like, okay, I can think about anything. And it happened to be that my wife, she was speaking with her friend who got married in the US at that time. And she was sharing with her all the issues she went through during the planning of the wedding, which, well, I couldn't help much. But then she started talking about financing and like how difficult was it to pay, especially because it was like in the midst of COVID. And I was like, that's an interesting kind of niche because, I've been following Klarna and Affirm for a while just because these are like absolutely fantastic companies. And I tried to deconstruct their financial model and, unit economics and obviously highly offline business or industry with a large check, which requires longer extension. And in our case, like 0%, zero retention rate. So because hopefully couples will never come back to us. That's basically like a killer to, Klarna or Affirm model because it's all about high volume, online presence, customers coming back and so on. And I was like, that's an interesting opportunity to explore. So they had a conversation on Thursday. On Friday, I quickly built landing page. I learned that 90% of ladies in the United States within 1 or 2 days after being proposed, they make an Instagram or Facebook post. And in 76% cases, they use 3 hashtags, which are engaged, proposal, ICDS. And I just messaged 300 people saying, hey, congrats, beautiful ring. By the way, I launched the company. At that point, I called it Wetfin. I didn't come up with like more creative name. And like if you're interested to get a 0% APR loan on your wedding expenses, sign up here. So by Sunday, I got 92 signups from consumers. And I repeated this exercise in a couple of Facebook groups because, weddings in the US, well, I guess it's everywhere. They're very regional. So there are a bunch of regional Facebook groups. So I sent a message. And by the end of the next week, I got 217 customer signups and 22 merchants. So that gave me some kind of like indication, okay, there is something in the idea. So I started digging, researching, building my network. As you can imagine, for the Russian guy sitting in London, trying to penetrate US weddings industry, like remotely, it's an interesting kind of challenge and process. So what I ended up with is, I asked a friend of mine from Revolut, we quickly built the, MVP, like the core BNPL kind of module and logic. Within like 3 or 4 weeks, we did this. So it was pretty quick. And then I was just doing a lot of like customer development research, speaking with those, couples, trying to understand like how the whole thing works. Like how people are thinking about weddings, because I got married 11 years ago, so it's been absolutely different reality. And by December, I met Andre, so our technical co-founder. We started working on the contract, and after like I think a month, we were like, hey, clearly things are well, like we understand each other. Let's just do it together. And In the apparel, I partnered with Annie Lee. So she's one of the top US wedding planners in the US. And she introduced me to our third co-founder, Anya Winika. So Anya is actually the person who was working at the Knot for 13 years. So she spent a lot of time from the moment when it was like pretty small company to the time when it's like global conglomerate. So Anya is the expert of the wedding industry. She knows everything about brand and marketing, like how to position the company. So that's how we got together. Yeah.
That's a great story. And so I just want to go back to the landing page thing and how you got your initial sort of MVP of the idea. I've seen in many marketing sort of advice blogs and stuff that if you just go into a Facebook group or start messaging people about products, you can get kicked out. How did you get around that? Did you?
Well, yeah, Instagram blocked me.
Oh, right. Okay.
They blocked me after like 300 messages, like pretty much the same. So okay. I was like, okay, like that's why I switched to Facebook.
Ah, I see. Okay.
Yeah, and one comment I wanted to add, about the prices that you mentioned before, like the numbers that you shared, they're averages, and like the thing that I definitely learned over the last year is there are no averages in the wedding space. Like every wedding is unique and it's different. Frankly, like with the current reality, the average wedding cost in the US is around like 45 grand. So it's very different to like official numbers because they're basically being pulled on like 21,000 couples, and depending which region, and even like within the region, like depending what type of couples you speak with, you get the different number in the end. So for the context, like the numbers we operate with and like what we communicate to investors and like as how we assess the market, there are 2.1 million weddings in the US every year, and the number was pretty much flat in the last 10 years. And with the average cost of wedding between 40 to 45K, that's a like 95 bill market. So it's a pretty big industry, and I'm not talking about adjacent industries such as bridesmaids market around like 7.2 billion, 8.4, which is cash registry. So there is a lot of opportunities around it. And yeah, I mean, I just feel like it's quite an old-fashioned industry, which was long time ripe for disruption.
Yeah, definitely. Those are huge numbers. Well, before I move on to the kind of meat and potatoes of the episode and talk about the business side of things, I wanted to make it clear for everyone listening what the benefits of Maru is for the actual consumer. And correct me if I missed anything. So the key benefit is for 0% APR, up to 24 months, you helped engage couples pay for their weddings via installments instead of all upfront. I think that's a fairly straightforward value proposition there. But the other benefits that you offer are things like event cancellation insurance.
That's right.
We'll talk about that in a moment. The 45-second credit assessment, and it doesn't impact the couple's credit scores. And you can set up the account in minutes. So maybe we can talk about that before we actually move on to the business side of things. Because one of your testimonials on your website from a lady called Annie Lee, she's the owner of a design company. She said the upfront payments and cancellation insurance is a total game changer. So yeah, it would be good to talk about a few of those things before we move on to the business side.
Sure, absolutely. So the value proposition that you mentioned are exactly on the spot. So for the couple which are facing, like, this is the reality of the wedding space right now. A lot of wedding vendors, they were really burned by chargebacks from last year when couples were canceling their weddings. So now they stopped accepting credit cards because the entire US is trying to get married in the next like 6 to 12 months. Like there is, huge imbalance between the demand and supply. So it means that vendors, they're increasing sometimes prices quite significantly. They have a lot of people coming their way, and they also don't accept credit cards. So couples are facing with a difficult reality when they're seeing high price tag, lack of payment alternatives, and, well, in full transparency, like from what we see, not as many people in the US have right now significant savings or like huge cash balances that they can just like pour in their wedding. And this is where we come in. Like we just help couples to split the payments in, convenient and equal installment plans. So for example, if it's a $12,000, venue cost or catering cost, like we just literally break it down in 12 equal payments and the couple pays $1,000 every month. And on top, yes, they're getting event cancellation insurance, but full transparency, again, like the insurance was not actually like it's not really the most interesting part for the couple. It's actually more interesting for the vendor. It's their protection, that if something goes wrong, if like, I don't know, the groom breaks the leg 3 days before the wedding, and based on their contract with vendor, like they can't get the money back if they don't have insurance, we protect them in this case, and we don't take the money back from the vendor. So everybody's happy in this case. Those are two main value propositions for the couple. I would say tier 2 propositions are consolidation of wedding expenses, everything in one place. Right now couples are facing with like 10 to 15 vendors on average. Every vendor has at least like 3 payment milestones, like deposit, intermediary, and final payment. They accept cash, checks, wire transfers, Venmo, Zelle, P2P transfer, whatever. Like, imagine how difficult is it to like track all those things, and like we help this in terms of consolidation. So that's for the couple. For the vendor right now, this is going back to like testimony from Annie that you highlighted. Yes, we sent full amount of their contract with the couple in 1 business day from the moment when the couple accepts the invoice. The current reality for the wedding vendor is they have to collect those payments over like 12 to 15 months. So we just like bring all the cash up front, which helps a lot of wedding vendors in terms of like cash flow planning purpose, from the cash flow planning purposes. Insurance, as I mentioned, and ultimately, we help vendors to increase conversion. And this is not like what we promote and like we stress out, but we see that couples themselves, they tend to spend a bit more with those vendors because they don't need to make like huge down payments on the spot. They can like spread the cost over time.
Yeah. There's a whole bunch of stuff you mentioned there that I wouldn't have immediately thought of, because if I was thinking of wedding financing, I would just think, well, get a loan and spread it over a certain amount of time and leave it at that. But there's just so many additional things that you've just mentioned, the wedding insurance for the actual vendors and spending more than you would have, a little bit more than you would have. And yeah, this is clearly a demand for something very unique in this niche,
yep,
which nobody was addressing before. So and the chargeback thing was fascinating. I didn't even know that.
Yeah. Well, that's what you learn when you're kind of going through the learning process in the industry and speak with folks.
Yeah. So let's move on to the business side of things. So the 5 key benefits, the full upfront payments was a huge one. So you pay within 1 business day of the couple booking. Cancellation insurance you've mentioned already. And I did read there's things like extreme weather events, accidents, job loss, and military deployment. So there's some quite a few scenarios there that you cover.
We don't cover COVID, obviously.
Yeah, I would expect that. Seamless payments is a third benefit. So you have a browser extension, which we'll talk about in a sec. Increased sales conversion, as you mentioned. And then we'll get to the transparency in a moment, because your fee structure is very clear and easy for everyone in the chain to understand. Let's talk about your browser extension and the stat that you have around this 3 to 5 invoices per couple, typically, for a loan from you guys. And it'd be good to talk about what they are, in addition to this invoice linking functionality to your browser extension.
Mm-hmm. Sure. So let me just address the latter part. In terms of browser extension, we were thinking like how we can simplify the process of creating this payment link between the vendor and the customer. Because again, if you're living in the environment when like 95% of sales are happening offline, you need some kind of augmentation for the actual transaction. And browser extensions seem to be a very simple way to do that. So ultimately, the vendor creates an account on our platform, downloads the extension, and he is ready. Like, you just basically literally need to add like $5,000 amount, click generate the link, and there is a unique link that connects vendor account with any customer account whom they can send the link. So it's not like one-to-one, it's one-to-many. And yeah, that's what kind of made us, I think, quite convenient for a lot of vendors who were interested in our offer, but they were a bit hesitant in the beginning because they had existing CRM systems. They didn't want to completely change their process, or redesign it. So that was a really like nice and simple bridge for them to start working with us. In terms of the second question,
we'll get to the transparency in a moment in terms of the fees for businesses. But the second question was,
About the invoices of the couple,
Yeah,
right?
the invoices, and what are those 3 to 5 invoices typically per couple that you mention on your site?
Yeah, so it actually ranges between every couple. So like we saw folks who who had only one invoice with us, others had 9. It's always a function of the credit limit that people get with us, because if you had, I don't know, if you got $3,000, there is not it's not like there is not much you can do, but like usually people try to spend it on like DJ, for example, or I don't know, some like photographer. In other couples, they had like $45,000 credit limit. So these folks financed like 9 or 10 invoices with us, which was pretty cool, because how our process works is that the couple comes to a vendor, they tell them, hey, I want you to pay me with Maru. The couple, like, obviously they don't know what is it. So they learn about us, they see the benefits, they're like, oh, cool, this is awesome. So they go through the credit assessment, get the credit limit, let's say $25,000. They spend $5,000 with this vendor. The next question, they come to us asking like, all right, where else I can spend the remaining 20? And now we tell them, you guys go around and like you tell all your vendors whom you want to work with that you want to pay them with Maru. Of course, they don't know about us at the moment, but like basically it's the couple who go and sell us to them. Because for the vendors whom we meet first time, we process the transaction for free. That's kind of like, freebie or customer acquisition kind of way. And then they see the benefit of like, oh, I got the whole amount of money up front. I got insurance. And they start offering us to their new couples. And then the cycle repeats and like self-propagates.
So that seems similar to how the buy now, pay later companies initially gained traction or the second bunch of businesses that came on board was when consumers kept asking, do you offer Klarna? Do you offer this? Do you offer that? So once you get smashed with it constantly, businesses will then come to you. Yeah.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then from the business side of things, for them to set that up, let's say they hear about you guys and they say, okay, let's do this. What's the process and how easy is it?
It's super easy. That's like, I think the fastest process we saw, it was around like 40 seconds. So people create their accounts, they add their, information. Many cases, like Google offers you like to have to fill a bunch of info because it's standard. And then through Plaid, we connect their business bank account where we funnel the money, and that's it. So they're ready to go.
45 seconds to a new revenue source. That's fantastic.
Yeah.
No complicated programming and hiring developers. It's just
for sure.
Nice and easy.
So like this was like one of the key like priorities for us, because our main priorities for us, because like we wanted to really make the whole process super simple, not to scare people that there's like another fintech with like fancy words, fancy processes. Like there is no developing. Well, it's quite rare that you face or see the wedding vendor with like development team or like even development person in their team. So we try to do it in like an absolutely simple way. So we built we built integrations with Zapier. So like we have a bunch of actions and triggers and hooks there. We also built white label integrations with some of our partners who have pretty significant volume, so they can benefit from like existing processes that they had, and we just kind of plugged into those. So like our main goal is like how to make it all super simple, transparent, and fair for both sides.
Yeah. And perfect. Move on to the last question I had was the transparency side. So what's your business model, and how much do you charge businesses and additional fees, etc.?
Sure. So we charge flat fee of 10%. We came to this pricing kind of in few iterations. So we started initially thinking, okay, like depending on the amount of invoice, let's charge like $4.99, then scale it to like $6.99 and like growing, because the larger the amount, the longer the extension. So cost of capital is different. So hence you need to charge higher rate. We faced a bit of like surprised reaction from vendors, because they were like, how is it possible I'm having like $60,000 invoice and I'm paying more in terms of percentage than like if I will be doing like $2,000 invoice. So the concept of time and cost of capital was a bit hard to like simplify. That's why we were like, okay, let's just do flat 10%, simple and easy for everyone to understand. And that's how we roll. In terms of fees, like for the couple, there is no like hidden fees or late payment fees or anything like that. So just like super vanilla, like straightforward.
Yeah. And because of the simplicity, in terms of your ideal business customer, You seem to cover everyone from solopreneurs to large brands. So do you want to talk about some of your customer base? Maybe if you can't talk the names, what kind of businesses?
Sure. So, well, I can talk about names, and like we're super proud of our partners. For example, Jordan Kahn Music Company. That's a very successful enterprise in Dallas, Texas. So they're running hundreds of events per year, and for their volume business, they were specifically interested in our offer because that helps their couples to minimize the barrier of entry into the transaction. So the alternatives of how they present this is like, hey, you can pay us 50% of deposit for the total invoice, or you can pay $400 via Maru and then spread the payment over 12 months. That's like no-brainer for the couple, and that helped them, to grow the business further. In terms of like other types of vendors, frankly, it's all across the board. We have DJs, photographers, videographers. We have wedding planners. So it's like pretty much everyone, because again, the value prop, it's about payments, and payments go through the entire kind of industry. So everybody accept payments, like the matter of, or like everybody sell. In this case, the value proposition is applicable for quite a broader audience. The difference, or like the segmentation starts, it's actually on the end customer, so on the couple, because obviously you can assume like folks who are making like 1 million above, or even like, I don't know, 500K and above, financing is not really something they might be super interested, just because it's easy, just like pay in cash, or like they write the check and that's it, and they forget it. At the same time, like median credit rating of our couples is 784. So it's pretty high credit score, which shows us that a lot of high wealth couples, they're also interested in our services, because you can spread it over time. It's convenient.
Make a higher return on another investment in the meantime.
So this is the trick. Like we started seeing like some folks who are closer to like financial markets, or like investing, they really get it. Like they see like, okay, I keep the rest of my money on the market, and I actually can lower the cost of my wedding just because I get interest like much higher than like, for instance, 10%. Not even 10%, sorry. Like, because it's not them who are paying, right? So it's like they basically can make interest over time or during this year.
Yeah, I mean, I've done that in the past, where I've moved into an apartment. I wanted to buy all new furniture, and I had the money to buy it all. And it just so happened a few weeks before, my bank had sent me a letter saying, you can have this credit card, 0.99% for 6 months. And I thought, well, that's basically free money. Why not just take it? I was earning 5% interest at my bank, so it was a no-brainer.
Absolutely. And it's the same thing for like Apple MacBooks, like the laptop I'm calling you from. I was offered by Apple also like at 0% APR over like 18 months. Like, why not? I could have purchased, I was coming to this website to purchase it on the spot, and now I'm being offered like 8 months. I'll take it.
Yeah, it's fantastic. Take advantage of the low rates while you can.
Sure.
Before I move on to some questions about demographics and sort of trends and stuff, which is one of my favorite parts of these discussions, I just want to talk about the company and you. I mean, you've got an interesting background. You were at Procter & Gamble in Russia, then you went to GE Corporate Finance, then Revolut. It would be great to hear about your journey and how you ended up here. Obviously, you mentioned that a little bit earlier, but what was your journey through the payments world, and how did you move around and why?
Sure. Yes, indeed. I started in Moscow, Procter & Gamble. I was doing business development. So I graduated with a corporate finance degree, but I really wanted to see how sales actually done on the ground, to see like actual people as customers. So I spent a couple of years there, quite successful. And then I was like, okay, I'm ready to go back to finance. So that's when I joined General Electric company. I started in Moscow, then was moved to Shanghai, then Paris, London, then 17 states in the US, back to Paris. And from there, Revolut hunted me to build and lead their corporate finance department in beginning of 2019. So I scaled the team from 0 to 5, and also was part of the core team raising Series D during 2019, basically the previous round, not the last one, but the one before. Yeah, and like I think for me there was a gradual transition from like safety to risk, because like GE was very like safe, corporate environment. Then like because of some turbulence in overall in the company, like things became like not, I would say, as stable. So I was like, okay, all things changing. And then when Revolut came, and I was like, oh, this is amazing, because I always wanted to work in startup. but it seems like already it's kind of scale up, right? So it's not just absolutely from scratch. Plus, a lot of startups, they don't hire finance folks in the beginning. So for me, it was like not far away from the start of Revolut, but it's still a cool opportunity to learn. I was just fascinated by the, by the culture, by the speed, pace, passion of people. I met a lot of good friends. Some of them are like, one of them became my advisor at Maru, Dan Westgard. So he works at Deal right now. So yeah, and this was like my, I would say, closer connection to like how payments actually work. And it was, yeah, I think it was like kind of no brainer for me just then at some point, like, I say, okay, I want to do something myself. Because like after I left, right now I have a WhatsApp group of like, I think 19 people, ex-Revolut, who are running their own companies right now. I think Revolut is just like a machine to create like those, or like to collect and then generate those folks who are like starting new interesting businesses. So it's a different type of culture, right? But I'm so happy that's kind of the journey I had there.
It reminds me of those stories you read about the PayPal mafia starting up so many companies. This may be a new cohort, you guys. Potentially.
I mean, again, like it's too early to say, I think, because a lot of those companies that just started like last year. So we'll see how all of us will go. But definitely, I mean, the fact that just people leave Revolut and start something themselves, it just shows that there is a passion, interest, like knowledge network that helps people not to be afraid, like let's do something on their own.
Yeah. And your background in P&G with your corporate finance background, I mean, that gives you a really good skill set for where you are now. You're dealing with brands, people are actually buying out there in the marketplace, but you're making sure at the back end your company's structured for growth, I'd assume.
Yeah, so this is like a really fun topic for me, because like in P&G it was all about sales, right? And like I'm a kind of finance guy, which is supposed to be like super analytical, right? And like maintaining those two sides, like being creative or like feeling people, and at the same time, yes, like sitting after work and like making sure our financial place, like financial model makes sense, so like unit economics work, or like the processes that we design, like from the back end, they work, or like the code that we write. Yeah, it's always a fun mix for me. I still don't know like in which camp I am. I think I'm like in between two.
What I find extra amusing is that corporate finance is super logical, and you're dealing with a highly emotional market, weddings, right? No, almost zero logic there at all. So that's quite funny.
For sure. And like this also goes through the entire product, because you need to demonstrate trust in your design, in like the way you position the brand, like because people need, we talk about money and like quite high amount of money, as we discussed. At the same time, we really want to make sure that people remember that the transactions they do on Maru and they make on Maru, they are related to their wedding, which is, yes, very emotional event. And we don't want to like make it just another utility like purchase or like whatever, like let's just spend 30 grand, whatever like the expense goes to.
Yeah, absolutely. On the note of brands, I would imagine that you could potentially have a marketplace, because if you've got photographers and venues and jewelry brands, goodness knows what else, you could potentially have huge links in that market alone. Is that something out in the future potentially?
I don't think so, frankly. It makes sense for sure. We really want to focus on like money side, like on the payment side, just because A, this is our strength, B, this is something that is really broken. Because I think there are a lot of listing companies in the wedding space, like The Knot, Zola, Wedding Wire. A, we don't want to compete with those folks. B, they're large enough, they have a really established kind of role in the market. Like what we want to become is more like, I think, kind of like Stripe for weddings, I would say. So just making the processing of funds as seamless and as possible for like very niche and vertical market. Because, even Stripe functionality, sometimes it's quite hard, like for wedding professionals just to set up or integrate and like put in their process. We're just making it as seamless as, like you send each other money on Revolut, like, or Venmo. So this is what we are aiming for.
Yeah, I've noticed I come across again and again people that have built solutions on Stripe. Just a tiny bit of value add. Well, it's almost nothing, but it's just enough, because it's just painful enough to use Stripe in anything other than just taking a simple payment. So
yeah.
What you said makes sense.
I mean, Stripe is great. It's like, it's another YC company. It's a idol and like someone we always look up to as an exemplary player on the market, for sure. It's just more like, we think that there's something we can add in like specific vertical for specific type of vendors, because there are a lot of startups coming, like banking for startups or like banking for startups in the UK, right? So like a lot of verticalization that starts. And we feel like this is our opportunity to look into like vertical market of weddings.
You mentioned you've got remote workers throughout the world, but in terms of the markets you operate in, is it mainly the US?
Yeah, it's 100% focused on the US, and we're not planning to go internationally. We don't want to go into adjacent industries for at least like 3 years. It's just such a large market, quite fragmented. So it will take enough time from us like to get some meaningful presence and like share on it. So we really don't want to lose focus on like going in different directions.
Yeah, totally understand that. I actually noticed on your Twitter feed a really interesting article from Bloomberg in terms of focus. Marriage madness across America has wedding costs soaring. So this was from July this year.
Yeah.
And one of my questions to you was, trends and sort of predictions for 2022. I'd imagine this is just huge backlog of weddings that needs to happen. And it's crazy stories like, people are fearing another lockdown, so they're getting married within days, but they can't get all the stuff they need. What's the situation, the latest?
Yeah, exactly. So what's happening, like after restrictions were lifted in the US, like the entire country is trying to get married in the next like 12 months. So in 2022, there will be more weddings in 1 year than any previous year since 1984. So it's a pretty big number, like 2.5 million. This is the estimate like, people have. That's a huge backlog from previous years. And like a lot of people or a lot of, I guess, folks engaged like in the moment just because like, hey, let's get married really now. So that'll be an interesting year. Like there is a lot of pressure on the wedding professionals at the moment. So last year, like those folks, they kind of they didn't have much work, and there was like concerns like how to maintain business, how to keep the lights on. Now it's absolutely like in reverse. Like it's more of a problem how to maintain and sustain this incoming flow of customers and how to process it. And like with some folks we were speaking, like they're saying, hey, I have 100 emails in my inbox and like I don't have time to get to reply all of them, just because like I'm booked and all the way until like 2022, end of 2022. Sometimes like people already booking 2023. So that's pretty interesting dynamic if you think about it. Like a lot can change in within the couple within the year when they are engaged. So like planning your wedding for 2 years, that's an interesting project, I think, for everyone.
Yeah, definitely. I was just thinking that the number of people I know who've got a digital SLR camera sitting at home that does nothing most of the time, they could become a sort of good amateur photographer and do some weddings, basic ones,
Well, I think this is what we will see as well. Like I'm just switching on or like taking on my economical or like analytical hat. Like with this major imbalance between demand and supply, I'm sure there'll be more like photographers who are just doing like headshots or whatever. They'll be switching into the weddings just because I think right now, if you say like I'm doing weddings, you're going to get like a backlog of customers. Of course, it depends on your quality and of work and so on. And the brand, it's super important. But yeah, I just feel like there will be more and more new players coming into the market.
Yeah, definitely. Huge opportunity. No, I mean, if word of mouth is normally good for things like photographers, right? So if you just know someone who, he's quite good at taking pictures, in a family or friends gathering, that alone could be enough to get you a bit of business.
But potentially, I mean, I really want to highlight that the importance of brand and like the quality of work in the wedding space is crucial. And if I really don't want to depreciate, I would say, the name of like really high caliber photographers, like professionals in the space, because for those folks, like this is their life, this is their business. They genuinely care about their clients and like and the event that is happening, right? So I think this is important for everyone who will be going to in the wedding space, not to see it as an opportunity to get a quick buck, but more like, hey, do I really care about the couple? Because those pictures will stay with those folks for the rest of their life. And it's not like you did a photo shoot for, just like romantic or whatever, and it's done and like you can redo it and so on. It's once in a lifetime, which is also like a big focus for us, because like our margin for error, like for us as a company, it's tiny, because we're talking about like once in a life event. You can't redo it. Yeah. So having right vendors on the platform, like folks who will show up, who will deliver right quality, this is one of the main priorities for us. This is why we start from, I would say, from the top in terms of like the market players, and then we gradually like expand in terms of the market presence, I would say.
So that's a good point. So if I do sign up and I start my catering business tomorrow to take advantage of a gold rush potentially, I'd imagine on your end, when somebody applies, that would be one of the things you take into account.
For sure. So like similar to Klarna, when you sign up with Klarna as a vendor, like they ask for like 2-3 days to set you up, or in my case, they go back and said, sorry, no, we can't get you on the platform. This is the same thing for us. Like we really look into like what kind of players are getting in, like to make sure that we have the right folks on the platform.
Yeah, fantastic. We're almost at the end. Got a couple of questions left for you. What are your company's biggest goals and challenges right now? What are you working on?
Well, right now we have quite ambitious goals by the end of this year, because we're approaching the beginning of the wedding season in the US. It starts in November and it lasts until, let's say, February, March. Just, as an interesting fact, Christmas Eve is one of the like highest number of engagements taking place in the US like every year. So it's it's an interesting moment, or like interesting next 4 or 5 months that we're heading into. We graded from YC end of September. So we raised our seed round. Now it's all about growth, and basically like we have quite ambitious goals for 2022.
Great stuff. If people want to get in touch with you guys, your website is maru.us and your Twitter account is @MaruWedding. If somebody wants to see your solution in action or needs to know anything else, what's the best way of engaging?
So you can just send email to hello@maru.us. Like I monitor this email myself, so we'll happy to answer. Or we have intercom on our website, same thing. So like any type of communication works. Like I'm replying pretty quickly.
Cool. And before we move on to the final 1 or 2 questions, is there anything important that you feel should be discussed that I missed maybe?
No, I think the importance is the team. Like I feel the team that we collected are kind of brought together is what makes us special, because bringing folks from finance, wedding space, while in technical world, it's not as easy, because you can't just like take any, wedding planner, like photographer, and like, oh, the person kind of, worked in the wedding space. That's it. So like, he knows or she knows how to operate. Like there should be, a special person with special skill set. And I mean, I feel blessed. Like we met with Anya and she got interested to work with us and build Maru as it is right now. I mean, same thing for Andrei. Like a lot of technical folks, like there's so many, companies on the market at the moment. Like you can just go to Netflix, Facebooks, and like any other companies, like make millions. And the fact that people believe in the idea and like they see the potential and want to work on something meaningful that will literally help a lot of, like not a lot, like millions of couples in the US in the very special moment of their life. I think that's something interesting in people who see it this way. So I think I just want to kind of stress out how happy I am with the team that we brought together. And of course, like the rest of the team, like engineers, product manager, and like social media folks, like that's for sure. Like without those folks, we wouldn't be anywhere close to where we are.
Reminds me of that phrase, missionaries, not mercenaries.
Well, yeah.
Great stuff. So let's finish with a couple of light questions. Have you got any funny stories or interesting stories that you've heard of on some of the weddings that have happened under your platform?
No, I mean, I actually think it's a really good thing that our like weddings that happen on our platform went perfect. So no funny stories, like nothing crazy to share on that.
Good stuff.
Which is a good news.
One for me personally that I'm, you've had an amazing career and you've had some pretty heavy roles. So how do you stay on top of your game in terms of reading, learning, and staying at the cutting edge? Got any tips for people?
Best sources of info are actually my friends and like people in the industry. So folks, and especially like ex-Revolut folks, because they do share like cool news.
Yeah, excellent stuff. Cool. Well, thank you so much, Alexey. That was really interesting conversation. I learned even more than I thought I would.